The scent of my perfume, a delicate jasmine, still hung in the air of the master bedroom, mingling with the faint new paint smell from our recent renovations. I stood in the center of the room, a bride on her wedding night, waiting for a husband who was already 20 minutes late. A cold knot of foreknowledge tightened in my stomach. I was no longer the Alara who would have paced anxiously, worrying if there had been an accident on base. I knew exactly what was coming. The sound of the front door opening was followed by not one but 3 sets of footsteps. I took a deep, steadying breath, smoothing the silk of my nightgown. The performance was about to begin. I walked out into the living room to find my husband, Kale, a major, standing with a woman and a small boy. The woman, Liana, held the child who looked to be about 3 or 4, his head drooping sleepily on her shoulder. She was the picture of tragic beauty, her eyes wide and shimmering with unshed tears. Kale's hand was on her back, a gesture of intimate comfort that felt like a physical blow, even to my prepared heart. Kale frowned when he saw me, his expression one of mild irritation, as if I were an interruption to a sacred moment. "Ilara," he began, his voice a low rumble of authority. "Liana has had a rough time. Marcus," he fell in line of duty. "She's alone with the boy." "I can see that," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. I turned my gaze to Liana, who flinched as if my look were a physical slap. "Sister-in-law, please don't blame Kale," she whispered, her voice a fragile, trembling thing. "It's my fault. We will leave first thing in the morning." She said the words, but her feet remained firmly planted as if rooted to the floorboards. The boy in her arms chose that moment to cough, a dry, pathetic little sound. Kale immediately turned on me, his face hardening. "See? You've scared them. The same old trick. Moral coercion." The original Alara would have crumbled, apologizing profusely, her own feelings invalidated by the perceived greater suffering of others. That capitulation would have been the first domino to fall, leading to a life of quiet subjugation. But I was not her. I pressed down the icy laugh that threatened to bubble up in my chest. When I lifted my gaze again, my face was arranged into a mask of warm, lively concern. I stepped forward, closing the distance between us and reaching for Liana's free hand. Her skin was cold. "Sis, what are you saying?" I chided gently, my voice dripping with false warmth. "You're our guest. How could you leave the moment you arrive? Kale is right. I shouldn't have spoken like that and startled you and the child." My sudden change in tone left both Liana and Kale stunned. Liana's eyes widened in genuine confusion and Kale's frown deepened, suspicion warring with relief in his gaze. "We military wives must help one another," I continued, my voice gaining a carrying, theatrical quality. I made sure to project it towards the open doorway, where I could see the shadows of curious neighbors lingering. "The fact that Kale brought you back shows he's loyal and true. As his wife, I must support him." I saw Kale's chest puff out slightly at my words. He was eating it up. "How about this?" I said, gesturing grandly towards the master bedroom. "The master bedroom is our newly decorated wedding suite. It's big and bright with its own attached bathroom. It's perfect for you and the child. Kale and I can squeeze into the guest room." The effect was instantaneous. Kale's expression twisted as if he'd swallowed a fly. Liana's face went stiff, her carefully constructed mask of gratitude cracking at the edges. She had wanted to play the considerate, self-sacrificing martyr, but my exaggerated generosity had pinned her completely. If she accepted, she would be the shameless woman who took the bridal suite on the newlyweds' wedding night. If she refused, she would be rejecting the magnanimous offer of a generous sister-in-law. It was a checkmate in the first move. "Sister-in-law, this isn't right," she stammered, her eyes darting to Kale for help. "It's your wedding room." "Why not?" I asked, widening my eyes in a show of innocent confusion. I turned to Kale. "Kale, don't you think so? We should give the best to the ones who need it most. That's what real care is, isn't it?" Kale's face flushed a bright mottled red. He was trapped. To disagree would be to admit his care was just empty posturing. He stood there, jaw working for a long, painful moment. "No need," he finally forced out, the words gritted between his teeth. "They can stay in the guest room." "How could that do?" I pressed, my tone laced with sweet concern. "The guest room is small and faces north, it's so damp. The child's health isn't good. What if he gets sick?" "Kale, you can't just say pretty words without backing them up." That would chill Sis's heart. I was building him a pedestal so high the fall would be devastating. If he wanted to be the flawless hero, I would help him become one. At the doorway, the neighbors' whispers grew louder. "Oh my, the Major's new wife is so generous," one woman murmured. "So sensible." I couldn't do it. Cale's face grew darker, a storm cloud gathering in our living room. Just as he seemed about to explode, a cool, authoritative voice cut through the murmurs from the doorway. "Cale, what's going on? Why is there a crowd?" I looked over and saw a man standing there, his uniform crisp, his posture straight as a blade. The stars on his epaulets outnumbered Cale's. It was Colonel Thorne, Cale's commanding officer. The only man in this entire mess who, according to the memories that weren't mine, had remained clear-headed. He was the one who had later tried to help the original Alara, only to be rejected by her fear. The moment Cale saw him, he snapped to attention, his personal turmoil instantly suppressed by military discipline. "Colonel Thorne." Thorne's sharp gaze swept over the three of us, a silent, assessing inventory of the scene. His eyes finally landed on me and I saw a trace of inquiry in them. He had heard enough. A new plan formed in my mind, swift and sure. I ignored Cale's nervous tension and deliberately let my shoulders slump slightly, swaying on my feet as if my knees had gone weak. I let my lower lip tremble just so, crafting an expression of someone who had suffered a terrible grievance but was bravely holding on. My eyes, with practiced ease, welled with tears. "Report to Colonel Thorne," I said, my voice trembling with a carefully calibrated blend of respect and distress. It's nothing. It's me. I didn't arrange things properly and made things difficult for Cale." My words were a masterpiece of inverted accusation. I was taking the blame, but every syllable pointed the finger squarely at Cale. Thorne's brows furrowed. When he looked at Cale, his eyes held a distinct displeasure. "Major." Cale, sweating under his superior's gaze, could only mumble, "Colonel, it's just a small family matter. I'll take care of it immediately." Thorne said nothing more. He only gave me one last deep, meaningful look before turning and leaving. But his presence was enough. The highest-ranking officer on the base now knew about the scandal unfolding in Major Cale's household on his wedding night. My goal was achieved. I had no more energy for theatrics. I didn't insist on Liana taking the master bedroom. Instead, I settled for the next best thing. I personally cleaned the guest room until it was spotless, spreading out fresh sheets and bedding with a bustling, wifely efficiency that made Liana visibly uncomfortable. "Sis, you and the child get some rest," I said, my voice all sweetness and light. "If you need anything, just tell me." Liana murmured her thanks, her voice a timid mouse squeak, though her eyes kept drifting towards Cale, pleading for rescue. Unfortunately for her, Cale was drowning in his own troubles and had no attention to spare for her. Once Liana and her son were shut in the guest room, Cale finally turned on me. The door had barely clicked shut before he was in my space, his voice a low, furious growl. "Alara, what the hell was that? Did you have to make a spectacle for everyone?" "Did I?" I blinked, feigning innocence. "Haven't I been supporting you all along? You're the one who said we had to be generous to take care of them. What is your so-called care if not empty words?" Cale was choked into silence. I let the fake smile fade from my face and looked at him with a calm that felt more powerful than any anger. "I married you because I wanted to build a good life together," I said, my voice even and low. "If that's what you want to, then handle things at home properly." I paused, letting the weight of my next words hang in the air. "If you don't," I said evenly, "then there's no need for us to waste each other's time." With that, I didn't spare him another glance. I turned and walked straight into the master bedroom, slamming the door shut with a satisfying final bang. On our wedding night, my husband and I slept in separate rooms. As I lay in the large, empty bed, the scent of jasmine now seeming cloying, I felt not sadness but a cold, sharp thrill. The first battle was over. The war for my life had just begun. The next morning, I woke up feeling refreshed and remarkably well-rested. The silence on the other side of the bed was a balm, not a wound. I dressed in simple, comfortable clothes and emerged from the bedroom to find Cale slumped at the kitchen table. Dark circles ringed his eyes, and his uniform was slightly rumpled. He looked like a man who had wrestled with his conscience all night and lost. When his gaze met mine, it was a complicated mess of anger, confusion, and a flicker of something that might have been shame. I couldn't be bothered to decipher it. I gave him a neutral nod and moved past him into the kitchen. Liana was already there, hovering hesitantly by the doorway like a ghost. "Good morning, sis," she whispered, her hands wringing together. "I was thinking of making some breakfast." "Sis, you're far too polite," I cut in, my voice a chirp of false cheer. I gently but firmly maneuvered her out of the kitchen. "You're our guest. How could I let you do the cooking?" I then proceeded to make the most austere breakfast imaginable. I cooked a large pot of plain watery congee and pulled out a single small dish of pickled radish. There were no eggs, no bread, no milk. Kale, who was used to a protein-rich breakfast to start his day, stared at the bowl I placed in front of him as if it contained mud. Before he could complain, I quickly filled a large steaming bowl for Liana and set it before her with exaggerated enthusiasm. "Sis, you're still recovering. You need to eat more. Our family situation is a bit tight right now," I said, sighing theatrically. "We'll have to save money where we can. There will be plenty of expenses down the road, right, Kale?" Kale's face turned a fascinating shade of green. He opened his mouth, caught my challenging stare, and then looked at Liana's downcast eyes. He was trapped. He couldn't demand better food for himself without looking like a selfish brute in front of his poor, struggling guest. He picked up his spoon and ate the bland porridge in sullen silence. After this harmonious meal, he left for work with a thunderous expression. I, on the other hand, felt light as air. I tidied up and then strolled leisurely to the military compound's cafeteria. It was peak breakfast time and the large hall was buzzing with officers and their families. The wives were gathered in small clusters, their conversations halting as I walked in. I could feel their eyes on me, curious and probing. Carrying my tray, I deliberately chose the most central table, where a few of the most notorious gossips, Auntie May and Auntie Lynn, were holding court. I didn't have to wait long. "Elara, dear, are you all right after last night?" Auntie May asked, her voice dripping with faux concern. "We heard some commotion." "Yeah, why did Major Kale bring that woman home?" Auntie Lynn chimed in, not even bothering to hide her curiosity. "What was that all about?" I sighed, letting a faint, sorrowful shadow cross my face. It was a masterclass in performance. "Aunties, please don't blame Kale," I said, my voice soft but carrying. "He's just too kind, too loyal. His comrades sacrificed his life, leaving behind a widow and a child. How could he possibly ignore them?" I looked down at my hands as if gathering strength. If he did, he wouldn't be the man, the hero I fell in love with. The women around me froze, stunned by my magnanimity. Then I shifted my tone, filling it with admiration and pride. "That's why I fully support him. I told Kale, your loyalty is my loyalty. Your comrades are my family." I paused for effect, looking each of them in the eye. "And to support his noble spirit, I've decided that from this month on, I'll be keeping his salary card." A ripple of surprise went through the group. In this day and age, a husband handing over his salary was normal, but my public declaration, wrapped in the cloak of righteousness, gave it a completely different flavor. "And I've decided," I continued, my voice growing firmer, more resolute, "to make Kale's loyalty even more meaningful, to echo the Army's call for generosity. This month I won't keep a single cent of his salary. We'll donate all of it, in both our names, to the base's welfare fund for families of fallen soldiers." The table fell into absolute silence. Auntie May's jaw was practically on the floor. "From now on," I announced, "every month I'll take a portion of his pay for charity. To help more people like my sister Liana who truly need support." Everyone stared at me as if I'd lost my mind. Donating her husband's entire salary? What kind of stunt was this? But my reasoning was flawless, a fortress of moral high ground that was impossible to assault. Anyone who objected would be labeling themselves as selfish and unpatriotic. Satisfied, I took in their stunned expressions. As I did, out of the corner of my eye, I caught sight of a familiar stern figure standing not far away with a tray in his hands. It was Colonel Thorne. He stood quietly, his gaze fixed on me, and I could have sworn I saw the faintest curve of a smile at the corner of his lips before he turned away. When I went to get my food, I found an extra chicken leg, the one I liked best, sitting on my tray. The canteen server leaned in with a grin. "Colonel Thorne asked me to add that for you," he whispered. He said, "A new wife with a noble spirit deserves a proper meal." I froze for a moment, then a genuine smile touched my lips. It seemed I had an ally in a very high place. News of my grand donation spread through the compound like wildfire. By lunchtime I had been anointed the model of virtuous generosity among the officers' wives, while Cale had been transformed into a shining, selfless saint, a role I knew would chafe him terribly. He confirmed it when he returned home after work. His face was as dark as a monsoon cloud. He stormed into the living room where I was calmly reading, his controls snapping. "Elara, what the hell are you playing at?" he roared, his voice vibrating with fury. "Who told you to donate my salary?" I looked up from my book, my expression one of pure, unadulterated conviction. "I was supporting you," I replied calmly. "Supporting me? By making me a pauper. Caring only for Liana and her child is too small-minded, Cale," I explained as if to a child. "I want your kindness to extend to even more people. Look, everyone in the compound is praising you now. They say your moral standards are so high. You're truly worthy of being a major." "I don't need that kind of praise," he snarled, his chest heaving. "What about our household expenses? How are we supposed to live?" "Don't you worry," I cut him off, my voice sweet yet firm. "I'll manage every penny carefully. From tomorrow on we'll have porridge 3 times a day. We won't starve." I raised my chin, a picture of stoic sacrifice. "As for Liana and her child, they're guests. Of course they can't suffer with us. I've already arranged it with the canteen. They'll get their own meals every day. The cost," I added, watching his eyes widen in horror, "will be deducted in advance from next month's salary." Cale's eyes nearly bulged out of his head. He pointed a trembling finger at me, speechless with rage for a full 30 seconds. "You are absolutely unreasonable," he finally roared. I sighed, rising to face him, my demeanor one of profound disappointment. "Cale, is your kindness toward Liana and her child only for show?" I asked, my voice soft but deadly. "Don't you want them to live well, to eat and dress decently? If you can't even part with a little money, what right do you have to say you'll take care of them for life?" Every word was a precise, well-aimed blade, nailing him to the cross of his own supposed morality. He could either admit he was a stingy hypocrite or swallow his rage and accept the financial ruin I had engineered. He stood there, choking on his own impotent fury, his face a mottled canvas of crimson and white. It was in that moment of perfect, seething silence that the guest room door creaked open and Liana stepped out. She was wearing a brand new dress, a stylish floral-printed sundress that made my blood run cold for a second before it boiled. It was the dress. The one the original Elara had saved up for months to buy, the one she kept hidden at the bottom of her trunk, too precious to wear even on her wedding day. It was the most fashionable style in the city. Liana tugged shyly at the hem, though her eyes gleamed with triumphant satisfaction. "Cale, sis, I couldn't find a change of clothes. I saw this one looked so nice, so I borrowed it for now." She turned her doe eyes to me. "Sis, you won't be angry, will you?" Her words were a timid apology, but her posture was a declaration of war. She was marking her territory, using my own possessions as her flag. Cale's gaze lingered on her, and a brief, unmistakable flicker of admiration passed through his expression at the sight of her in that dress. The sight of his approval, directed at her in my stolen clothes, was the final confirmation I needed. This was no longer just about winning a battle of wits. This was about survival. Angry? I only smiled, a wide, benevolent smile that didn't reach my eyes. I stepped forward and took her hand. "How could I be angry? You look beautiful in it. It suits you much better than it ever would me." I spun her in a gentle circle right there in the living room, my effusive praise making her smile widen with genuine, unguarded pleasure. Then I shifted my tone sharply, raising my voice just enough to carry through the open window to where I knew our nosy neighbor, Mrs. Clark, was likely eavesdropping. "This dress, you know," I said conversationally, "was my wedding gift from my mother-in-law, Cale's mom. She bought it for me in the city, said I should wear it for special occasions. The fabric is wonderful. I haven't even worn it once." I saw Liana's smile falter. Mrs. Clark, who had been pretending to water her plants on her porch, was now frozen, her watering can tilted forgotten. I lifted my hand in a gesture of mock magnanimity. "But that's all right, sis. If you like it, I'll give it to you. What's one dress? As long as you're happy, that's what matters." Liana's smile froze and then shattered completely. She had been transformed in an instant from a pitiful woman borrowing clothes into a greedy opportunist flaunting another woman's wedding gift. Mrs. Clark's expression twisted in disbelief. A daughter-in-law giving away her mother-in-law's precious gift to another woman? The scandal was too delicious. I didn't know it was from Auntie, Liana stammered, her face pale. I'll take it off right now. Don't, I said, holding her firmly by the arm. Once something is given away, it can't be taken back. You wearing it is giving my mother-in-law face. I leaned in slightly, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was still loud enough to carry. If she hears that I passed on her gift to someone who needed it more, imagine how proud she'll be of me. What a thoughtful, generous daughter-in-law she raised. Liana stood there in that beautiful dress as if it were woven from nettles. Meanwhile, I walked calmly to the phone in the hallway, picked up the receiver, and in full view of my horrified husband and his mortified white moonlight, dialed my mother-in-law's number. The strongest reinforcement was about to arrive on the battlefield. The phone rang 3 times before a familiar, sharp voice answered. Hello. Hello, Mom. It's me, Ilara. I made sure my voice was bright and bubbly, the picture of a happy new bride. Ilara. My mother-in-law, Gwendolyn, sounded surprised. What's wrong? Did something happen with Kale? No, not at all. I denied quickly, layering my tone with joy. Everything is wonderful. I just wanted to share some good news. That beautiful dress you bought me for the wedding? The floral one from the city boutique? I gave it away. There was a profound silence on the other end of the line. I could picture her face, the initial confusion hardening into disbelief. Gave it away, she finally said, her voice dangerously low. To whom? To Kale's comrade's widow, Liana. I chirped as if announcing I'd won the lottery. She just arrived and didn't have any nice clothes to change into. She looked so pretty in it, Mom, just radiant. So, I decided on the spot to give it to her. I paused, injecting a note of sweet uncertainty. You don't blame me, do you? Kale says we must be generous and loyal to our comrades. I thought you would feel the same, wouldn't you? Another long silence stretched out so thick I could almost feel it through the phone line. Kale was staring at me, his face a mask of pure horror. Liana looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. Finally, Gwendolyn's voice returned, low and heavy with controlled anger. Good child. You did the right thing. There was a sharp intake of breath. You've been wronged. Wait for me. I'll come over tomorrow. I hung up the phone and turned to face the room with a radiant smile. See? Mom is so happy. She's coming tomorrow to see us. For the first time, Kale looked at me with something close to raw panic. Ilara, I'm begging you. Don't blow this up any further. My mom's health isn't good. She can't take the stress. I'm not blowing anything up, I answered with wide-eyed innocence. I was just telling her about our family's fine tradition of generosity and loyalty. She'll be happy, not upset. Kale had no retort. He was utterly defeated, choked into a seething silence. Liana, meanwhile, fled back into the guest room and stayed there all evening, probably racking her brains on how to face the incoming hurricane that was Gwendolyn. I slept soundly that night, the master bedroom all my own. The calm before the storm. The storm broke just past midnight. I was jolted awake by frantic cries from the guest room. It was Liana's voice, pitched high with terror. Leo, what's wrong? Don't scare Mommy. This was followed by Kale's urgent pounding on my door. Ilara, open up. Leo has a high fever. I took my time. I slipped on a robe, ran a hand through my hair to make it look suitably sleep-tousled, and then opened the door slowly. Kale was cradling the little boy, whose face was flushed and alarming red. Liana stood beside him, sobbing dramatically, tears streaming down her face. Hurry. We have to get him to the hospital, she cried. Kale roared at me, get dressed. Now. Why take him all the way to the hospital? I asked, my voice unnervingly calm amidst their chaos. Don't we have the base clinic? Dr. Evans is the best in the entire garrison. Calling him will be faster than driving to the city hospital in the middle of the night. Without waiting for their response, I turned and bolted out the front door. As I ran into the center of the residential compound, I mustered all the strength in my lungs and cried out, help! Someone help! A child is dying. My shrill voice tore through the stillness of the night. One by one, lights flicked on. Doors opened. People hurried out, draping coats over their shoulders, their faces a mixture of sleep and alarm. What happened? What's going on? I ran straight to the most densely populated building, my performance one of frantic, concerned sister-in-law. There's an emergency at Major Kale's house. His comrade's son is critically ill. Someone call Dr. Evans quickly. My cry worked like magic. Within 5 minutes, not only had Dr. Evans been roused from the clinic, but several nearby officers, including Colonel Thorne, were alarmed and came over as well. When Thorne appeared at our doorway in a crisp uniform, his brows furrowed in displeasure, Kale's face was no longer pale. It was the ashen color of death. Liana had stopped crying, frozen in place as she clutched her child, realizing the scale of the scene she had inadvertently created. Dr. Evans, a man in his 60s with a no-nonsense demeanor, quickly examined Leo. He listened to his chest, felt his forehead and checked his throat. "It's nothing serious," he concluded, his voice crisp and clear in the tense silence. "Just a common cold with a fever. Give him some children's antipyretics. Keep him cool and hydrated. He'll be fine by morning." The words, "nothing serious," hung in the air, making the entire scene unbearably, excruciatingly awkward. The gathered neighbors and officers stared at Kale and Liana. All this commotion rousing the entire compound and even disturbing the colonel, over an ordinary fever? Colonel Thorne's expression was icy. He didn't look at the child. His eyes were locked on Kale. His voice was cutting. "Major Kale. You're a battalion commander, not a rookie recruit. Over a minor family matter, you disturbed the whole residential compound in the middle of the night, disrupting the rest of countless comrades. Do you think that's appropriate?" Kale lowered his head, utterly speechless, his ears burning a bright, humiliated red. Thorne then turned to Liana. Though his tone softened slightly, his authority was unmistakable. "Ma'am, your worry for your sick child is understandable. But the army has discipline and the compound has rules. If everyone behaved like this over a simple cold, how could the army function?" Liana's lips trembled, but she couldn't utter a single word of defense. All the while I stood off to the side, playing the part of a frightened, helpless bystander. Once the focus had shifted squarely onto the two of them, I made my move. I stepped forward, gently tugging on Kale's sleeve. I spoke softly as though trying to reason with him, but loud enough for everyone to hear, especially Thorne. "Kale, I know this is hard for you. Liana is struggling to raise her child alone and you're caught in the middle. It must be so exhausting." I took a shaky breath. "I've been thinking, maybe we should divorce." The words sliced through the lingering tension like a guillotine. "You and Liana truly care about each other," I continued, my voice trembling with feigned heartbreak. "And the child needs a complete family. Well, I'll let you go." My voice wasn't loud, but every word was clear, echoing in the dead silence of the courtyard. It was a bomb. Kale's head snapped up, his eyes wide with utter disbelief. His expression shifted from shock to pure, unadulterated panic. He had never imagined that I, the woman he thought would endure everything quietly, would propose divorce so cleanly and decisively in front of his superior and the entire neighborhood. "What nonsense are you spouting?" he blurted out instinctively. "I'm not talking nonsense." I met his gaze steadily, my eyes glistening with manufactured tears. "Kale, look at you. You've ended up pleasing no one. You've offended your leaders, disturbed the neighbors, and you've wronged me." I looked him right in the eye, delivering the final blow. "I don't want to see you in such torment anymore. If we divorce, then you can keep them by your side openly and no one will gossip. Isn't that the best solution for everyone?" Every word I spoke sounded like gentle, understanding compassion, but each one was a shiv to Kale's pride and his career. "I don't agree," he practically shouted, his voice cracking. "Ilara, I will not divorce you." It was the first time he had ever refused me with such firmness. Unfortunately, it was far too late. Colonel Thorne stood silently nearby, watching without interrupting. But in his eyes, I saw the faintest glimmer of approval. He then waved his hand at the crowd. "Disperse, everyone. The show's over. Don't disturb others' rest." The neighbors, though reluctant to leave the drama, obeyed their leader and drifted away in small groups, casting backward, pitying glances at me. Only when the courtyard was quiet again did Thorne step closer to Kale, patting his shoulder with a tone that was anything but comforting. "Kale, you need to know where to draw the line. As a soldier, your loyalty to your comrades is commendable, but it cannot come at the cost of your own family. Keep that in mind. He cast me one last unreadable glance before turning and leaving. Kale was completely rattled. He even forgot to comfort Liana, who sat frozen in shock on the sofa, clutching her now sleeping son. Instead he stared at me, repeating over and over, "I won't divorce you. You can forget it." I couldn't be bothered to waste more words on him. I went back to my room and locked the door. The sound of the bolt sliding home was the most satisfying sound I'd heard all night. The next morning, the hallway erupted with thunderous shouting. Gwendolyn had arrived. "Kale, get out here, you ungrateful brat." Her furious voice, honed by years of managing a household and a stubborn son, shook the entire building. I opened my door to a magnificent scene. My mother-in-law stood in the middle of the living room, one hand on her hip, the other jabbing a finger inches from Kale's face. He was still in his pajamas, looking like a scolded schoolboy, drenched in humiliation. Liana was cowering in the corner near the guest room, holding Leo, her face pale as a sheet. The moment Gwendolyn saw me, her anger melted into dramatic concern. She hurried forward, clasping my hands in hers, her eyes brimming with indignant tears. "Elara, my good child, you've suffered," she declared, pulling me into a bony but firm hug. "Don't you worry. Mom will stand up for you." I leaned into her shoulder, squeezing out 2 well-timed tears. "Mom, don't blame Kale. It's all my fault. I wasn't capable enough to keep his heart." My words, meant to soothe, only fanned her fury higher. "Nonsense." She swung her head toward Kale, glaring daggers. "You fool. You've got such a good virtuous wife and you still went chasing after that jinx." Her sharp gaze sliced over to Liana. Liana flinched as if struck. "Auntie, no, it's not like that," she stammered, her eyes filling with fresh tears. "Kale and I are innocent." "Innocent?" Gwendolyn let out a bitter, disbelieving laugh that echoed in the small space. "Innocent enough to sleep in my son's bridal chamber? Innocent enough to wear the new dress I bought for my daughter-in-law? Innocent enough that when your child had a simple fever, you almost tore this family apart and woke the entire military base? And you call that innocent?" Her firepower was even stronger than I'd imagined. Liana was utterly defeated, unable to form a single word of defense. Kale tried to step in. "Mom, please, it's complicated." "Shut up." Gwendolyn smacked his arm aside without even looking at him. "Answer me one question. Do you choose her or do you choose us?" Kale stood cornered, his eyes darting from his mother's furious face to Liana's terrified one, and finally to my calm, detached expression. His face was twisted with pain and struggle, the weight of his own stupid decisions crushing him. Watching the chaos, I felt no satisfaction, only a deep, abiding disgust. I no longer wanted to waste my time acting in this farce. The stage was too small, the players too pathetic. So, while Gwendolyn and Kale were locked in their heated argument, I quietly slipped back into my room and dragged out the suitcase I had already packed the night before. I had known Gwendolyn's arrival would be the catalyst for my exit. When I rolled the suitcase into the hallway, everyone froze. "Elara, what are you doing?" Gwendolyn cried out in alarm. I gave her a gentle, reassuring smile. "Mom, don't worry. This has nothing to do with you. You've always been kind to me." Then I turned my gaze to Kale, my expression turning to stone. "This is between Kale and me." I looked straight at him. "Kale, since you refuse to divorce, I won't force you." I saw a flicker of hope in his eyes, which I immediately extinguished. "But I don't want to stay in this house another minute. I'm moving out for a while to clear my head. You should also think carefully about what you really want." With that, I pulled my suitcase and walked out the front door without looking back. Behind me, I heard Gwendolyn's anxious cries, Kale's hurried footsteps, and Liana's muffled sobs. But I didn't turn around. I wanted them all to know that I, Elara, was not anyone's appendage. Leaving Kale wouldn't kill me. On the contrary, I would live even better without him. I dragged my suitcase straight to the base's logistics office and applied for a single dormitory room. The clerk, a young woman who had undoubtedly heard the rumors, looked at me with a mixture of pity and respect before quickly processing my application. My new room was small, Spartan, and perfect. It was mine and mine alone. The silence was a symphony. I later heard through the ever-efficient gossip mill that after I left, The household descended into absolute chaos. Gwendolyn, true to her word, stood her ground. She threatened to disown Cale unless he immediately sent Liana and her son away. Cale, caught between his misplaced sense of duty and his enraged mother, refused. They had a fierce, screaming quarrel that ended with Gwendolyn claiming chest pains, being rushed to the base hospital. Cale was then left juggling the mess at home, the scornful gossip in the army compound, and the quiet but immense pressure coming from Colonel Thorne. He became haggard and withdrawn almost overnight. But none of that had anything to do with me anymore. My days in the dormitory were simple, peaceful, and leisurely. I read books from the base library, ate my meals in the canteen, enjoying the extra chicken legs that sometimes mysteriously appeared on my tray, and took long solitary walks. The pitying looks from other wives slowly turned into ones of curiosity and a grudging admiration for my nerve. Yet I knew I couldn't drift like this forever. Financial independence is the foundation of personal independence. The original Alara had a high school diploma, which was considered a good education in that era. But the consciousness inside me now was a university graduate from a prestigious English program and held an advanced translator certificate. I couldn't let that skill go to waste. The base often had international exchanges and needed translation and documentation work. It was my way in. I spent a week preparing, then gathered my courage and knocked on the office director's door. Director Sloan was a harried-looking man in his 50s. After I explained my intention, he looked deeply troubled. "Alara, I'm sorry. We don't have any vacancies. And you're still a family member. Procedure-wise, it's complicated." "Director," I cut him off politely but firmly, handing over a handwritten English cover letter I had prepared overnight, along with a perfectly translated military article. "I don't need a formal position. I can work as a temp. You can judge me by my ability. If I'm not up to standard, I won't insist." My handwriting was neat and forceful, my translation precise and fluent, far beyond the average level of that time. Director Sloane's eyes lit up as he read. He adjusted his glasses, looking from the papers to me with newfound interest. After a moment of thought, he said, "Wait here. I need to ask the leader." My heart hammered against my ribs. I had a feeling I knew which leader he meant. Not long after, the door opened and Colonel Thorne walked in. He seemed surprised to see me there, pausing briefly in the doorway before his gaze fell on the materials I'd submitted on Director Sloane's desk. He picked them up and examined them even more carefully than the director had. Then he switched to English. "Explain the strategic significance of this passage in the context of modern infantry tactics." I answered calmly and fluently without missing a beat, expanding on the text with insights that clearly surprised him. He asked 2 more technical questions, each more complex than the last. I met each one with a concise, knowledgeable response. The admiration in his eyes grew stronger with every reply I gave. Finally, he set the papers down and told Director Sloane, "Keep her on a 1-month probation. Pay her the highest temporary wage." Just like that, I had a job. On my first day, I displayed a high level of professionalism. Whether sorting files or translating documents, I worked quickly and accurately, earning nods of approval from my senior colleagues. Occasionally, Thorne would step out of his office and hand me a stack of particularly challenging materials. "Can this be finished by the end of the day?" he asked, his tone all business. "No problem, Colonel Thorne," I replied with a confident smile as I accepted the papers. Our interactions were purely professional, but in the eyes of those who wanted to see otherwise, the meaning was twisted. And I knew it was only a matter of time before one person in particular took the bait. My new life fell into a satisfying rhythm. The dormitory was my sanctuary and the office was my proving ground. I thrived on the mental challenge of translation, on the quiet respect I earned from my colleagues through sheer competence. Colonel Thorne was a fair but demanding superior. He gave me difficult tasks and acknowledged their successful completion with a curt nod that felt more rewarding than any effusive praise. Our interactions remained strictly professional, but they were frequent. He seemed to value my efficiency and sharp mind. Sometimes I'd catch him watching me as I worked, a thoughtful expression on his stern face. It was a look of assessment, not attraction, and I preferred it that way. Inevitably, the gossip started. I heard the first whispers in the women's bathroom. Always in his office with the door closed, a hushed voice said, "Of course, she's ambitious. First she couldn't keep her husband, now she's aiming for the colonel. Shameless." And she hasn't even divorced yet. I knew the source without having to see her face. Since I had moved out and found a job, her position in Kale's house had become precarious. My mother-in-law, after being discharged from the hospital, had returned home, a permanent, grim-faced sentinel of disapproval. Kale, his career stagnating under the weight of scandal and Thorne's displeasure, was sullen and withdrawn, his noble sacrifice having lost all its luster. Desperate and cornered, Liana had resorted to the oldest, cheapest form of counterattack. The whispers grew bolder, slithering through the compound like a venomous vine. I decided it was time to prune them. That afternoon I went to the communal water room to fill my kettle and happened upon the source. Liana was there with 2 other officers' wives, their heads close together. The moment they saw me they stiffened, falling into an awkward silence filled with mocking, expectant looks. If it had been the original Alara, she would have fled in shame or erupted in tearful denial. I simply walked forward slowly, a warm smile plastered on my face. "Sisters, what are you talking about? So lively." They glanced at each other but no one dared answer. I turned my smile directly onto Liana. "Liana, I think I just heard you mention me and Colonel Thorne." Her face turned the color of chalk. She stammered, I didn't say anything." "Didn't say anything?" My smile stayed fixed but my tone dropped, becoming sharp and clear. "Funny because I clearly heard you say I was seducing Colonel Thorne." Liana froze, caught. The other wives tried to smooth things over. "Alara, don't misunderstand. We were just chatting casually. You shouldn't take it seriously." "Casually?" I kept my expression pleasant but my voice was ice. "Sisters, words like that aren't to be tossed around casually." I paused, letting the weight of my next word settle. Whether I, Alara, am proper or not is one thing. But accusing me of seducing Colonel Thorne raises 2 very serious issues. I looked at each of them in turn. First, are you questioning Colonel Thorne's judgment and character? Do you think a decorated officer of his caliber would be so easily manipulated by a restless woman? Or are you suggesting his integrity is so poor that he would get involved with a subordinate's wife? The women instantly fell silent, their faces paling. To cast doubt on a commanding officer's conduct was a charge none of them could bear. Second, I turned my gaze back to Liana, who was trembling, her lips white. "You say I'm seducing another man, but I am still Kale's lawful wife. If you claim I'm unfaithful, aren't you also saying that Kale can't even control his own wife? That he's been cuckolded?" I tilted my head, my smile turning deadly. Where does that leave his pride? Where does that leave the honor of the Kale family? Or, I leaned in slightly, is it that you want people to look down on Kale? That you want his career ruined by domestic chaos? That was her true intent, laid bare, and she panicked completely. She shook her head over and over, stammering incoherently. "No, I didn't. I didn't mean that. I wasn't." "Then what did you mean?" I pressed, refusing to let her escape. Just then a cold, sharp voice cut through the air behind us. "What is going on here? Don't you have anything better to do?" It was Thorne. None of us had heard him approach. His face was stern, his gaze a honed blade. The courtyard fell into a terrified silence. His eyes swept across the group before landing on me. "Explain." Before I could speak, Liana rushed forward, tears spilling down her cheeks in a practiced cascade. "Colonel Thorne, don't misunderstand. It was all my fault. I shouldn't have spoken recklessly. I apologized to my sister-in-law." Thorne didn't even glance at her. His eyes remained locked on me. "You speak." So I did. Calmly and concisely, I recounted the rumors Liana and the others had been spreading, followed by the logical rebuttal I had just delivered. My words were precise and unemotional. Thorne's face grew colder, the temperature around us seeming to drop several degrees. He turned his gaze on Liana, his voice devoid of any warmth. "Mrs. Liana, Comrade Alara was personally assessed and approved by me to work in this office. Her abilities and professionalism are recognized by everyone." He took a step closer and Liana shrank back. "You need to understand that words carry consequences. Spreading baseless rumors and slandering others undermines the unity of the army. This is no small matter." He let that hang in the air for a moment. "Considering you are the family of a fallen soldier, I'll limit myself to a verbal warning this time. But if it happens again, I will personally report it to the political department and have them address your ideological problem. Liana stood frozen, too frightened even to cry. She was a statue of humiliation. After firmly admonishing everyone present, Thorn turned back to me. "Comrade Allaire, return to your work. Don't let such nonsense affect your mood or your efficiency." His public defense was a shield that crushed all the gossip at once. From that day forward, no one dared whisper in front of me again. Liana, completely subdued, avoided me like the plague. When Kale later learned of this incident, he came to my dormitory for the first time. He stood in the doorway, his expression a twisted knot of humiliation and a vague, unspoken regret. "Elara, let's talk," he said, his voice hoarse. "There's nothing to talk about," I said, not even letting him step inside. "If you came to apologize on Liana's behalf, save it. If you came to accuse me, you've got the wrong person." "No, he hurried to explain. "I just want to say, Liana didn't mean it. She just feels insecure." I laughed, a cold, sharp sound that made him flinch. "Kale, whether she feels secure or not has nothing to do with me. What I do know is that she has crossed my boundaries again and again, and you have indulged her every single time." I met his eyes, my gaze steady and unforgiving. "Our problem has never been Liana. Our problem has always been you." With that, I closed the door, shutting him and all his unfinished excuses out. Life settled back into a productive peace. I poured all my energy into my work. It was while I was sorting through a batch of old archives for Director Sloan that I stumbled upon it. A thick binder of records pertaining to pension disbursements for the families of fallen soldiers. My fingers, almost of their own volition, found the page for Liana's late husband, Marcus. The record was meticulously detailed. It clearly stated that beginning the month after his death, a substantial regular pension had been deposited into a designated account under Liana's name. The signatures, her contact number, and the address of record were all properly listed. The numbers on the page were more than enough to cover comfortable living expenses for her and her son. Yet she had told Kale that all of her husband's savings had been used to pay off medical debts, that she was destitute, penniless, and desperate. She had been lying from the very start. My hands trembled as I held the photocopy I quickly made. It wasn't anger I felt. It was a cold, thrilling excitement. This was the final piece. This was checkmate. That weekend, the compound held a large family gathering, a picnic on the main grounds. Nearly everyone attended. The air was filled with the smell of grilled meat and the sound of laughing children. Kale was there, standing stiffly with his mother, who pointedly ignored Liana. Liana sat at a distant table, alone with her son, the picture of isolation. Halfway through the event, during the time for family members to share thoughts, I raised my hand and walked up to the small makeshift stage. Every eye in the crowd turned to me, including Thorn's from the head table and Kale and Liana's from their separate corners of shame. I took the microphone. "I just want to thank the Army leadership for their care and support," I began, my voice warm and sincere. "And today I especially want to thank one person. My husband, Kale." Kale froze, his body going rigid with shock. He clearly hadn't expected this. "Everyone knows our family went through some unpleasantness recently," I continued, my tone laced with gentle understanding. "Kale insisted on caring for his fallen comrade's widow. And at the time I didn't understand. I even quarreled with him about it." I smiled, a brave, wounded smile. But later I came around. Kale told me how hard Liana had it. Her husband gone, her pension all spent paying debts, leaving her penniless, homeless, with only a child to raise. How could we not help her? Of course we had to. My words rang with righteousness. The crowd, unaware of the truth, nodded along, many looking at Kale with a flicker of returned respect. I saw his back straighten almost involuntarily. The fool actually thought I was salvaging his reputation. But then I shifted my tone, layering it with a touch of profound confusion. "But recently, while organizing some archives for my work, I came across something odd." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the folded photocopy. "This document," I said, holding it up for everyone to see, "shows that every month since the month after her husband's death, Liana has been receiving a considerable pension from the Army. It has never once stopped." I let the silence stretch, watching as the confusion on people's faces turned to dawning comprehension. "I wondered," I said, my voice now clear and carrying across the suddenly silent field, "did I make a mistake? Or is there some kind of misunderstanding here?" I turned my gaze from the paper to Liana, whose face had gone ghostly white, and then to Kale, whose shock was so plain it was almost pitiable. With wide-eyed innocence I asked the question that would shatter both their worlds. Liana, can you tell everyone what's going on? Didn't you say you didn't have a cent to your name? The picnic grounds went dead silent. You could have heard a leaf drop. All eyes locked onto Liana and Kale. Kale's expression shifted from shock to confusion to a slow, burning disbelief. He whipped his head toward Liana, his gaze full of a raw, betrayed accusation. In that moment the entire foundation of his duty and righteousness crumbled to dust. He wasn't a hero. He was a colossal fool strung along and exploited by a calculating woman. Under the weight of countless angry, scornful stares, Liana broke down completely. She tried to stammer an explanation, but no coherent words came out. The mask of the pitiful widow was gone, replaced by the face of an exposed liar. At last, with a strangled sob, she grabbed her son's hand and fled in disgrace, chased by the silent, contemptuous judgment of the entire community. Kale stood rooted to the spot, staring at me. His eyes were brimming with a maelstrom of shame, regret, and a desperate, flickering plea for what? Understanding? Absolution. But I couldn't be bothered to spare him so much as an extra glance. I had given him every chance. I stepped down from the stage, the microphone dropping from my hand with a soft thud. The gathering ended not long after, dissolving into an awkward, buzzing silence. The scandal of Liana's deception and Kale's monumental foolishness was the only topic of conversation. I had won. Not with screams or tears, but with a smile, a public platform, and a single damning piece of paper. Liana was formally summoned by the logistics office. The verbal warning was a thing of the past. Now it was an official reprimand. She was ordered to move out of the compound within 48 hours. There were no extensions, no sympathy. The sight of her, red-eyed and frantic, packing a small suitcase under the watchful eyes of a stony-faced officer, was the final act of her pathetic play. Kale, though not formally punished by a military court, received a different, more enduring sentence. His reputation was in tatters. The image of him as an officer with catastrophically poor judgment was cemented in everyone's mind. I heard through Director Sloan, in a hushed, sympathetic tone, that the promotion he had been expecting for over a year was quietly, permanently shelved. He was now a cautionary tale, a man who had sacrificed his marriage and his career on the altar of a lie. He paid the price for his foolishness, and I was done paying for it with him. The day after the picnic I went to his house, my former house, one last time. Gwendolyn opened the door, her face a complex map of grief and grim satisfaction. She didn't say a word, just stepped aside. Kale was sitting at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd served him plain porridge a lifetime ago. He looked hollowed out, a shell of the confident major I had married. I placed the single piece of paper on the table in front of him. It was the divorce agreement. I had already signed it. Sign it, Kale. His hands trembled as he looked at the paper. He raised his head, his eyes bloodshot, his voice a broken rasp. Alara, give me one more chance. Please. It was my fault. All my fault. He began to ramble, recalling fragmented, happy memories from our brief courtship, as if they were charms that could ward off this reality. I cut him off coldly. I'm not a recycling bin, Kale. I don't take back trash. He flinched as if I'd struck him. Ashes from a crematorium cannot be brought back to life, I said, my voice flat and final. What we had is long since burned to nothing. My indifference, my absolute finality, shattered the last of his defenses. He closed his eyes, a single tear tracing a path through the stubble on his cheek. He picked up the pen with a trembling hand, and with an anguish that seemed to consume him, he signed his name. There were no disputes over property. I only took back the savings that were rightfully mine, the clothes I had left behind, and my dignity. I was cutting all ties. The day I received the final divorce certificate from the Civil Affairs Bureau, the sun was impossibly bright, washing the drab government building in a golden light. I walked out the doors, the small booklet in my hand, feeling not like an end but a beginning. An incredible lightness filled me, as though a physical weight I had been carrying for years had been lifted from my shoulders. I stood on the steps, breathing in the free air, when a familiar military jeep slowly pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down, revealing Colonel Thorne's sharply defined face. He wasn't in uniform but in a simple, well-fitted shirt. His expression was unreadable. "Get in," he said. It wasn't a command but an offer. I didn't hesitate. I opened the passenger door and climbed in. The interior smelled of clean leather and faintly of his cologne. He didn't speak as he pulled the car away from the curb, driving smoothly through the city streets. We rode in a comfortable silence, the events of the past months a tangible presence between us. When we reached the gates of the compound, he didn't drive in. Instead, he pulled over to the side of the road and turned to me, his gaze steady and serious. "Ilara," he said, my name sounding different on his lips, stripped of rank and formality. "Congratulations on regaining your freedom." "Thank you," I said, and found that I was genuinely smiling at him. "Now that you're free," he continued, his voice low and deliberate, "would you give me the chance to pursue you?" I froze. My heart, which had been so calm and settled moments before, began to thunder uncontrollably in my chest. I looked at this man before me, this stern, principled, unexpectedly kind man, whose eyes held nothing but a direct, unwavering sincerity. He wasn't offering pity or a rebound. He was stating an intention, clear and simple. The shock melted away, replaced by a warmth that spread through my entire being. I suddenly laughed, a real, unforced laugh that made my eyes crinkle at the corners. "Colonel Thorne," I said, my voice laced with a teasing note I hadn't known I still possessed, "if you want to pursue me, you'll need to file a report. Is your report ready?" For a moment he looked startled. Then the most incredible thing happened. The stern lines of his face softened and he smiled. It was a small, genuine smile that reached his eyes, transforming him completely. "It's already written," he replied, his tone matching mine. "Ready to be submitted. Just waiting for approval from the highest authority." Our story, I realized, was beginning at that very moment. Not with drama or desperation, but with a quiet understanding and a shared smile. As for Cale, my freedom became his prison. He went mad. The finality of the divorce, the sight of me moving on, broke something in him. He started calling my dorm phone relentlessly, the phone ringing into the silent night until I unplugged it. He waited for me outside my dorm, his eyes pleading. He even tried to block my path to the office, his uniform rumpled, his breath smelling of alcohol. He brought flowers, wilted things from the commissary. He wrote long, rambling apology letters that I burned without reading. "Ilara, come back with me," he pleaded one day, grabbing my arm as I left work. I shook him off with a force that surprised us both. "Let's remarry. I'll listen to you in everything. I've already sent Liana away and my mom agrees too." "That's enough, Cale," I said, looking at him with a calm that felt like armor. "We're divorced. I'm living well now and I don't want anyone disturbing my peace. But whatever you are, whatever you feel, it is no concern of mine." I cut him off, my voice cold and final. "Your so-called awakening only came after you lost me. That kind of cheap, belated affection. I don't need it. Your life is your own, Cale. Live it well. Just don't bother me again. Major Cale." Thorne's voice cut through the tension like a whip. He had emerged from the office building, his posture radiating authority. He stepped directly in front of me, a solid, immovable shield. "Show some respect," Thorne said, his voice low but carrying an immense weight. "Comrade Ilara is now the woman I'm pursuing. Please stop disturbing her." Cale, after witnessing the protective stance Thorne took, after seeing the way I stood beside him not as a victim, but as an equal, finally broke down completely. The last of his pride evaporated. Every night, the compound echoes were filled with the sound of him drinking himself into a stupor on his porch, sobbing my name like a child. Some pitied him but most only sneered. "If only he'd known this day would come," they'd whisper. "Why did he act that way before?" There is no medicine for regret. I only heard later about his ultimate fate. Because of his misconduct and the scandal that had become legendary on the base, his career was utterly ruined. He was passed over for every promotion, sidelined in every meeting. Before long, he was transferred to a remote, insignificant outpost in the frozen north, a place where ambitions went to die. He wasted away there, a bitter and forgotten man, his life ending in obscurity. As for Liana, after leaving the compound, her life was said to be a complete mess. The pension was hers, but her reputation was destroyed. She drifted from one low-paying job to another, the shadow of her deception following her everywhere. They both paid the price for their selfishness and stupidity. Me. I had long since, under the steady, respectful love and support of a man like Julian Thorne, grown into the truest version of myself. I excelled in my work, eventually being offered a permanent, senior position in the translation department. Julian and I took our time. Our courtship was a quiet affair of shared walks, intense conversations, and a mutual respect that deepened into a love that was as strong and steady as he was. We married a year later in a simple ceremony. Gwendolyn attended, clinging to my arm and telling anyone who would listen that I had always been the daughter she'd wanted. My new life was not just a rebound or a reaction to the past. It was the life I had been meant to live all along. A life of respect, of partnership, of peace. I had not just survived, I had won, and in winning I had found myself. Of course. Here is the continuation and conclusion of the story. My new life with Julian Thorne was not a fairy tale. It was something better. It was built not on fleeting passion, but on a foundation of mutual respect, shared silence and intellectual challenge. There were no grand, dramatic gestures, only a series of quiet, steadfast choices. We did not move into the large, commanding officer's residence immediately. Instead, we spent our first year of marriage in a modest house on the edge of the compound, a place that held no ghosts for either of us. Julian believed in earning one's space and I cherished the privacy. We furnished it slowly together. I chose a bookshelf that took up an entire wall. He picked out a sturdy oak desk where we would often work opposite each other late into the night, the only sound the scratching of his pen and the soft rustle of my papers. My work flourished. Freed from the constant drain of emotional warfare, my mind felt sharper than ever. I was promoted to head of translation and documentation, a position created specifically for my skills. My team respected me not because I was Colonel Thorne's wife, but because my translations were faster, more nuanced, and more accurate than anyone else's. I had found my calling not in supporting a man, but in building a career of my own significance. Julian was my most ardent supporter. He never once expected me to play the part of the dutiful officer's wife, hosting tedious tea parties or engaging in petty gossip. When the other wives came calling, I received them with polite professionalism, but I did not seek their circle. To my surprise, my distance, coupled with my undeniable competence, earned me a different kind of respect. They viewed me as an enigma, a woman who had carved her own path and won the heart of the most respected and feared man on the base. Our love was a quiet force. It was in the cup of tea he would place by my elbow when I was buried in work, in the way his hand would find the small of my back in a crowd, a silent anchor. It was in the debates we would have over international policy, where he valued my opinion as much as any of his staff officers. He saw me not as a prize he had won or a victim he had rescued, but as a partner, an equal. We rarely spoke of Cale or Liana. They were part of a past that held no power over my present. But the echoes of their downfall occasionally reached us. A letter would arrive for Julian, official correspondence, and he would sometimes mention without malice that Cale's name had come up in a transfer list for a particularly desolate post. There was no pleasure in his tone, only a faint, professional disappointment. It was a closed chapter. Then one rain-swept autumn afternoon, the past attempted a feeble resurrection. I was leaving my office, my umbrella fighting a losing battle against the wind, when a gaunt figure stepped out from under the eaves of the commissary. It was Cale. He was almost unrecognizable. His uniform hung loosely on his frame, and his face was etched with lines of bitterness and poor health. The confident major was gone, replaced by a haunted, middle-aged man. He had been granted a brief leave, he stammered, to collect some belongings from storage. "Elara," he said, his voice raspy. The rain plastered his thin hair to his forehead. "You look, well." "I am," I replied, my voice calm. I made no move to go, nor to invite conversation. I simply stood waiting. I heard you married him." "Thorne." "I did." He nodded, a jerky, painful motion. "He's a good man. A better man than me." He looked down at his worn boots. "I was a fool, Elara. A blind, arrogant fool." The apology I had once craved now felt like a pebble tossed at a fortress wall. It meant nothing. "The life I have now, Cale, is not a reward for having suffered through you," I said, my words measured. "It is the life I built for myself after I chose to leave. You were the obstacle, not the trial." He flinched, but he did not argue. He had no fight left in him. "I loved you, you know," he whispered, the words meant to be poignant but landing with the weight of a lie. "In my own way." "No," I corrected him gently, finally feeling a flicker of pity for this hollowed-out shell. "You loved the idea of me. The quiet wife who would adorn your arm and never challenge you. You loved the drama Liana offered. You never loved the real woman standing in front of you. Julian does." The use of Thorne's first name was the final, subtle blow. It spoke of an intimacy Cale had never achieved, never deserved. He had no response. He just stood there in the rain, a monument to his own regrets. "I hope you find peace, Cale," I said, and I meant it. Not for his sake but for my own closure. Then I turned and walked away, the sound of the rain drowning out any further words he might have spoken. I did not look back. I knew with absolute certainty that I would never see him again. When I arrived home, damp and slightly chilled, Julian was building a fire in the hearth. He took one look at my face and asked no questions. He simply took my coat, handed me a glass of brandy and led me to the sofa. We sat in silence, watching the flames dance, his arm around my shoulders. He knew. He always knew. And in his quiet understanding, I felt the last lingering shadow of my old life finally dissolve. Years have a way of softening the sharp edges of memory, of turning past pain into a distant landscape viewed from a safe and prosperous shore. 5 years after that rainy day encounter with Cale, I received the official notice of his death. It was a terse, bureaucratic letter forwarded from his last post. He had died of pneumonia alone. There was no one to claim the body. The army handled the arrangements. I read the letter once, then filed it away with other old documents. I felt a quiet sadness, not for the man he became but for the waste of it all. The boy who had once dreamed of being a hero had been consumed by his own weaknesses. I lit a candle for him that evening, a small, private gesture for the ghost of what might have been, then blew it out and went to dinner with my husband and our daughter. Yes, our daughter. Little Anya, with my dark hair and Julian's piercing gray eyes, a child born of love and wanted from the moment we knew of her existence. She was the final joyful piece of our life. She filled our home with laughter and a chaos that was entirely welcome. Julian, to the surprise of many, was a doting, endlessly patient father. The stern colonel who could silence a room with a glance would get down on his hands and knees to play pony with his daughter, her squeals of delight echoing through the house. He saw in her a future unburdened by the past, and he was determined she would know only security and love. My career continued to soar. I was now a recognized expert in military linguistics, occasionally consulted by departments in the capital. I had authored several papers and trained a new generation of translators. The name Alara Thorne carried weight in its own right. I was no longer the wife of, I was simply myself. One summer evening we hosted a small gathering at our home, now the commanding officer's residence, which we had moved into after Julian's most recent promotion. Our guests were a mix of officers, their wives, and several of my colleagues from the translation department. The conversation was lively, flowing from current events to books to the absurdities of base life. From across the room I caught Julian's eye. He was listening to a young captain, but his gaze was on me. That small, private smile, the one that was reserved only for me, touched his lips. In that look, I saw a universe of shared history, of quiet triumphs, and a deep, abiding love that had been built, day by day, through choice and respect. Later, after the guests had departed and Anya was safely tucked in bed, we sat on the porch, watching the fireflies dance in the garden. "Penny for your thoughts," Julian said, his hand covering mine. I leaned my head against his shoulder. "I was just thinking about the path that led me here," I said softly. "It was so tangled and dark for so long. I couldn't see a way out." "You didn't need to see the whole path," he replied, his voice a low rumble against my ear. "You just had to take the first step. You were the bravest person I had ever met, long before you ever knew my name." His words settled deep inside me, a permanent warmth. He was right. The old Alara had been crushed, but the woman I was now had been forged in that fire. I had not been saved by a man. I had been recognized by one. I had saved myself. I thought of Cale, a faint, faded picture in the album of my mind. I thought of Liana, whose fate remained unknown to me, and I hoped for her son's sake that she had found some measure of peace. Their story was a tragedy of their own making. Mine was a story of reclamation. The night air was cool and sweet. Julian's hand was warm in mine. From inside I could hear the soft, even breathing of our sleeping child. This was not a victory over anyone else. It was a victory for myself. I had not just survived the storm. I had learned to dance in the rain, and in doing so, I had found a sun I never knew could shine so brightly. I had grown into the truest version of myself. And the life I had always wanted was no longer a want. It was my reality, simple, strong, and utterly my own. The end.